A new strategy document out of the White House puts one weapon system above every other program the Pentagon funds. Not aircraft carriers, not fighter jets, not hypersonic missiles, submarines. The Washington Times reports that a newly issued White House technology strategy names Navy submarines as the top priority in America's defense technology investment goals. The document reportedly places undersea warfare above other weapons categories. If that's accurate, it's one of the clearest public signals yet of where the administration wants defense dollars and industrial attention to go next. That's the headline. The harder question is what it actually means for the Navy, for shipbuilders, and for the country this strategy is most obviously responding to: China and its fast-growing submarine fleet. Over the next few minutes, we'll walk through what the document is reported to say, what top priority plausibly means inside a technology strategy versus a budget bill, why submarines specifically sit at the center of this competition, and where the real uncertainty still is. A strategy paper and a funded, built submarine are two very different things. I went through how the Navy's public shipbuilding testimony and the Pentagon's own posture statements have talked about submarines over the past several years, and one thing stands out before we even get to this new document. Undersea warfare has been creeping toward the top of the list for a while. This isn't a bolt from nowhere. It's the visible tip of a trend that's been building. So, what's actually being reported? The Washington Times account describes a White House technology strategy. Not a defense budget, not a shipbuilding plan, but a broader strategic document that puts submarines as the Navy's top priority within the administration's technology investment goals. Undersea warfare, per this reporting, ranks above other weapons categories, and the stated reason is rising competition with China's expanding submarine fleet. It's worth pausing on what kind of document this is, because it changes what top priority means. A technology strategy is a statement of direction. It tells agencies, industry, and Congress where the administration wants attention and investment to concentrate over the coming years. It's not an appropriations bill. It doesn't allocate a dollar figure to a specific submarine. What it does is set the terms other decisions get made against, including eventually the budget requests submitted to Congress, which is the body that actually controls the money. That distinction matters for how we read this story, and we'll come back to it. Now, the context, because submarines are the priority, only means something once you understand why submarines occupy such a unique place in naval competition. A submarine's core advantage is stealth. Surface ships, carriers, destroyers, frigates can be tracked by satellites, radar, and increasingly by commercial imagery available to almost anyone. A submerged submarine, particularly a nuclear-powered one, is much harder to locate and track continuously. That's the reason submarines are the most survivable leg of a nuclear deterrent, and the reason attack submarines are one of the most effective tools for contesting an adversary's navy without exposing a multi-billion-dollar surface ship to modern anti-ship missiles. The U.S. submarine force splits into two broad missions: attack submarines, the Virginia-class boats currently in production, hunt other submarines and surface ships, gather intelligence, and can launch cruise missiles. Ballistic missile submarines, the aging Ohio-class boats, being replaced by the new Columbia-class program, carry the sea-based leg of the nuclear triad. Both matter here, but the top priority framing in this reported strategy tracks most directly with the broader push around undersea warfare capacity. How many boats the Navy can build, sustain, and keep at sea. That capacity question is the quiet crisis underneath this whole story, and it's well documented, not speculative. For years, the U.S. submarine industrial base, the shipyards, the specialized suppliers, the trained workforce needed to build and maintain nuclear submarines, has struggled to produce and maintain boats at the pace the Navy says it needs. Congressional oversight bodies and Navy officials have repeatedly testified about production timelines slipping and maintenance backlogs growing. That's the backdrop against which make submarines the top technology priority has to be read. It's about whether the country can physically build and maintain the fleet a strategy like this envisions, not just about funding new research. Here's the obstacle in plain terms. Even if the White House places submarines at the top of its technology strategy, that ranking runs straight into a shipbuilding base that spent the better part of a decade trying to catch up to existing demand before this new emphasis even arrives. Naming a priority on paper doesn't expand a shipyard's physical capacity or produce more nuclear-qualified welders. Navy and industry officials have acknowledged this gap in congressional testimony for years. Any real shift towards submarines as the top priority runs through that industrial constraint, not around it. So the strategy sets a direction. Whether the shipbuilding base can deliver on it is a separate, much harder question, and it plays out in appropriations, hearings, shipyard contracts, and workforce numbers over the next several budget cycles, not in a policy document. Which brings us to the other half of this story. Why now, and why China? The reported justification is rising competition with China's expanding submarine fleet. That tracks with what the Pentagon has said in its own periodic assessments of China's military modernization. China has been steadily growing and modernizing its submarine force, alongside a broader naval buildup that's already made it, by hull count, one of the largest navies in the world. Analysts who study the Indo-Pacific balance of power have flagged undersea capability specifically. Not just the number of submarines, but their quietness, their weapons, and how effectively they can be tracked, as one of the areas where the military balance is shifting fastest. Put yourself in a Pentagon planner's seat looking at that trend line. Submarines are expensive, slow to build, and take years of specialized training to crew and maintain. You can't surge them the way you might speed up a drone production line. If you believe the undersea balance is where a future confrontation would actually be decided, then a technology strategy that puts submarines above every other weapons category is a coherent response to a specific, trackable trend, not an arbitrary bureaucratic choice. That's the administration's apparent logic, as reported. It's also a framing, one choice among several the country could make with the same concerns about China's naval growth. Other administrations and outside analysts have at times argued for prioritizing unmanned surface and undersea vehicles, long-range strike, or the surface fleet's own missile capacity instead. Naming submarines the priority is a bet on where the undersea fight matters most, not the only possible bet. Here's the part that doesn't fully add up yet, and it's worth sitting with. A strategy document can name a top priority in a single sentence. Fixing a submarine industrial base that's been under strain for the better part of a decade takes years of sustained investment, workforce training, and shipyard expansion that no document conjures by itself. The real test of this story isn't the headline. It's what shows up in the next defense budget request and whether Congress funds it at the scale the strategy implies. What strikes me about this story is less the ranking itself and more what it reveals about how Washington signals priorities before it commits money. A technology strategy can be updated, revised, or quietly deprioritized long before a shipyard breaks ground on an additional hull. That doesn't make the signal meaningless. Strategy documents shape how agencies write budget requests and how industry plans investment. But top priority today isn't the same as funded and built tomorrow. Most defense strategies actually succeed or fail somewhere in that gap. Here's a take that might not sit well with everyone. Naming submarines the top priority is the easy part. The government has said, in various forms, that the submarine industrial base needs urgent attention for years now through congressional hearings, Navy testimony, and prior budget requests. If this strategy document doesn't come paired with sustained, multi-year funding for shipyards and workforce development, it risks becoming another well-intentioned priority statement the underlying industrial base simply can't keep pace with. So where does this actually stand right now? What's confirmed is narrower than the headline suggests. A White House technology strategy document has reportedly named submarines the Navy's top priority and ranked undersea warfare above other weapons categories, according to the Washington Times. What's not confirmed, at least not in the reporting summarized here, is any specific new dollar figure, any specific new submarine program, or any timeline attached to that ranking. Those details, if and when they exist, would most likely surface in subsequent defense budget requests and congressional testimony, not in the strategy document itself. That's an important line to hold. It's easy to read top priority and assume a wave of new submarine funding is already locked in. The more accurate read is that the administration has stated a direction. Whether that becomes new contracts, new shipyard investment, or accelerated Columbia-class and Virginia-class production is a separate, still open question that plays out over the coming budget cycles. There's also the AUKUS piece worth flagging because it's directly relevant to how stretched the submarine industrial base already is. The U.S. has committed, under the AUKUS partnership with the U.K. and Australia, to eventually selling Virginia-class attack submarines to Australia, a commitment that itself depends on U.S. shipyards producing enough submarines to meet both Navy and Allied demand. Any new emphasis on submarines as a technology priority sits on top of that existing commitment, not separate from it. If shipbuilding capacity is already stretched between Navy needs and AUKUS obligations, A new top priority designation adds urgency to a capacity problem that predates this strategy document by years. So would you have expected submarines, rather than something flashier like hypersonics or AI-directed weapons, to top a White House technology strategy? It says something about how planners are actually thinking about where the next confrontation would be won or lost. Underwater, quietly, rather than in a headline-grabbing new weapons category. What's genuinely not yet known? The precise language of the strategy document itself, since most coverage describes its contents rather than quoting it in full. Any specific budget figures tied to the submarine priority? And whether this ranking shows up in the next formal defense budget request submitted to Congress, which is the point where a stated priority either gets real money behind it or doesn't. Watch for the administration's next budget rollout and for Navy shipbuilding testimony in the months ahead. That's where top priority either turns into contracts and shipyard investment or turns out to be mostly rhetorical. I didn't dig into the line item breakdown of the strategy document for this video, mostly because the public reporting doesn't provide one yet. Comment more if you want to follow up once budget details surface, because that's genuinely the point where this story either becomes concrete or fades into the long list of stated but unfunded defense priorities. For now, here's the honest summary. A White House technology strategy has reportedly elevated submarines above every other weapons category as the Navy's top investment priority, framed around competition with China's growing submarine fleet. That's a real and notable signal about administration thinking. What it is not, at least not yet, is a funded shipbuilding plan, a new contract, or a guarantee that the submarine industrial base's long-standing capacity problems get solved. The distance between naming a priority and building the boats to match it is exactly where this story is headed next, and it's worth watching the coming budget cycle to see which side of that gap it lands on.